You're on the Spot with Mande Wilkes.
Welcome to On the Spot. I'm Mande Wilkes. Before we get started on today's show, I want to tell you a little bit about the upcoming couple of episodes on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. I'll be airing a two-part special called Faith in Politics, and I'll be sitting down with a forum of religious leaders in the area to discuss what role, if any, faith should play in politics. That's on Christmas Day and on New Year's Day, and I hope you will tune in. When I come back, I will be sitting down with South Carolina Department of Transportation Commissioner Sarah Nuckolls to talk about some of the potentially corrupt things that may be going on with regard to Interstate 73. I'll be right back with Commissioner Nuckolls. Welcome back. I'm sitting with Commissioner from the South Carolina Department of Transportation, Sarah Nuckolls. Sarah has been very outspoken in terms of some potentially underhanded things going on with regard to Interstate 73. It's a huge, huge issue for the Myrtle Beach, Horry County, Florence area, for the area of South Carolina as a whole, and it's going to be probably the single largest election issue coming up in terms of the new 7th Congressional District. Welcome, Commissioner Nuckolls. Good to have you on.
Thank you, Mande. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate always the opportunity to get the truth out there to the best that I can. And I think so many times a lot of the things that we do today are the difference between fact-checking and politics. And I think the taxpayer anymore has decided, I think they prefer fact-checking. I think they're a little bit tired of the political methodology.
I think you're exactly right. People watching out there are tired of not knowing what's going on.
Exactly.
So speaking of fact-checking and telling the truth, one reason I wanted to have you on today is to comment on something an area representative said about you doing your job as a commissioner. Representative Thad Vyers, who, as it turns out, is running for Congress, has publicly called for your firing because you've been so outspoken with regard to fact-checking. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think if he wants to fire me, he may want to fire a great many people in South Carolina who pay taxes and who vote and who want to see transparency in government, and they want to know that their elected officials are accountable to the public trust. And that is really my only motivation. Representative Vyers may not realize it, or he may, I don't know. If I should be fired because I ask questions about the tens of millions of dollars in things that we are asked to vote on with the DOT and concerning our roads and bridges, then I don't think that's a valid reason to fire me. If he wanted to say that my goal really was transparency and accountability, and those may be overworked words, but I still hold to them. I think they are true. I think they're true with the public today. And that has been my goal, was to understand what I'm doing, understand what the DOT is doing to the best of my ability, and to vote accordingly, and to try to get the information out there to the public. Some people might call me a whistleblower. Well, I really feel like it's more that I am a public servant, a sworn public servant, who wants people to understand what I'm doing, what the DOT is doing, how we're spending your money, where it's being spent, because there are choices to be made. There are lots of choices.
What it sounds like going on is that Representative Vyers and also I think other Department of Transportation commissioners are calling for your firing because you're essentially doing your job too well.
Well, thank you.
I think that's what's going on.
I hope so. I mean, I would like very much to be known as someone who worked hard and did my job well.
You oppose I-73.
Right.
That's what's the gist of what I heard.
This whole thing. You're right. You're right.
So why do you oppose I-73? Because I have to tell you, a lot of people watching out there are going to wonder why you oppose I-73, because a lot of officials in this area have sold to voters the idea that 73 is going to be a one-stop shop in terms of turning this economy around. What do you have to say to that?
Well, as I said earlier, I think the facts will speak for themselves. First of all, the portion of I-73 that's being discussed right now is from I-95 down to the Conway bypass. And that's not very far. That's 40 some odd miles, I think, something like that. And I have a map that I brought with me. I think we can look on the map and see that.
Okay, we can put that map up.
Yeah, there's a road that comes off I-95 right now. It's called South Carolina 38. Back a few years ago, in fact, it was widened to 4 lanes in 2007 at a cost of $23 million, okay? And it joins with US 501, which comes straight down into Myrtle Beach, as everyone probably knows. That's a 4-lane divided highway the entire distance. It is about 6 miles parallel to the new route that's being proposed for I-73. The I-73 route is $1.5 billion. Well, we could upgrade South Carolina 38-501, which does the same thing, for far less money, possibly $100 million or less. Now, I'm throwing around hundreds of millions of dollars, but $100 million compared to $1.5 billion is a big difference.
So what I'm hearing, I've heard you, what I'm hearing you say is something I've heard you speak about before, which is the difference between buying a new car or simply maintaining a car that you already have, getting oil changes regularly and such. Is that kind of the difference between building a new road and...
Yeah, that's an excellent analogy. There was a guy on the news this morning who's written a book about being more efficient. I thought it was interesting in America, and it's a mindset. It's a mindset of practicalities. We have all sorts of issues in our state and our nation with how we spend money. We've got tremendous debt. People are looking for ways to be more efficient. And I would say that even if we had 5% unemployment and tax money coming in up the Yahoo, you know, and just an abundance of money, why shouldn't we be careful and efficient with taxpayers' money? Why do we need to build something tremendously costly when we have something that might work just about as well? In fact, what could you build along I-73 and develop into jobs that you could not build along 38-501? I saw lots and lots of vacant land along there.
So one alternative that you're proposing to save taxpayers a lot of money is to maintain and keep up existing roads.
Well,
what's
absolutely.
another alternative that I've thrown around and I hear thrown around a lot is a public-private partnership. What about that?
I am in favor of public-private partnerships.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, I'll be glad to. In fact, there was a good example, well, there was an example of that. First of all, the legislature has passed a law in South Carolina that would allow us to do that. And that's where, let's say you want to build a road, you want to build I-73 or whatever, any road, any significant road. You would allow a private firm, a large firm, this would be a very large engineering construction firm from the private sector, to come in and do what they call design, build, finance, maintain. There's all kind of various variations on public-private. And they would be interested in doing that, and of course they're a private firm. They would expect to make some money for their shareholders. So that you're basically allowing the private sector to do what government has been doing and hopefully to do it better.
And more efficiently, which is the point we were speaking about previously.
Now what's interesting is that I know that several very large firms, I won't name their names, but they're international firms, were contacted about doing I-73. When they looked into it very carefully and did their research, they couldn't make any money off of it. And the reason is because the traffic counts were not high enough for them to toll that road to repay their investment.
Speaking of tolling the road, and we'll get back to the public-private partnerships in a minute, but speaking of tolling the road, is road tolls, is that a viable alternative, do you think?
Well, it is, and I've even said that I would support tolling I-73 as long as we don't put a burden on the taxpayer. Okay, that's the catch. Right
so
now,
what would happen under that model? Would only tourists pay the toll?
Anyone who rides on the road would pay the toll. That could be in-state, out-of-state, whatever.
Well, that would seem to burden the taxpayers.
It could, but they would have a choice, see, because they have all these alternative routes. And those choices that we have, we've got a lot of roads coming to Myrtle Beach now, just like the one I just mentioned. You know, people say, well, I don't want to pay $4.50 or whatever it is one way to drive to Myrtle. Maybe I'll just take this other route. Well, that means that the volume, you have to have a lot of volume to have tolls, enough tolls to pay for it. I lived in South Florida 30 years, and they've got toll roads all over the place, but they've got about 80 million tourist visitors a year, and they've got high-density areas down in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and Orlando. I don't know if anybody's been on around the Orlando, Tampa area recently, but
So 73, I kind of hear you saying it's putting the cart before the horse in a way. We don't have the number of visitors at this point to really handle such a huge investment.
You're right, and that's why these companies backed away from it. It did not look like a winning investment for them. In fact, this is what is really, we've already had a deal like this in South Carolina. It was called the Southern Connector. It's Interstate 185 in Greenville County. That was 16 miles. I don't know if y'all have been up that way. You go up 26, you hang a left on 185. It cuts across to 85 southbound. A lot of people take it when they're going to Clemson games, okay? But you're paying a toll.
USC fans,
yeah,
we won't hold it against Sarah.
I thought I had to throw that in there to get that going. You know, I knew that would work. And by the way, you know, of course, USC did win recently. I thought I would just mention that.
There you go. She threw a bone to USC fans.
Okay. but I love both schools. I really do. But anyway, that road was private bondholders sold bonds, a couple $100 million worth. They sold them, private investors, and the road failed. The projections, the economic projections, and you know we've got this Shimura study that the Myrtle Beach Chamber has done that gives all these glowing, rosy economic projections. Guess what? They had a company, a international firm that did the projections for I-185. It didn't fly. They never even met half the traffic that they needed to make that thing pay. As a result, the bonds defaulted and it went into bankruptcy it was settled in a bankruptcy court last April.
So more debt for our state.
Well, no, thank goodness it was.
Because it didn't go
forward. It was a public-private partnership. The bondholders ate it. But now, the DOT now has another 16 miles of interstate highway that runs, what, $25 to $30 million a year to maintain, that we have to maintain, that we don't need, that has very little traffic. Kind of like Conway Bypass here. $400 million highway investment for this state in Horry County. And the traffic is just, it's kind of funny. You go on that road and nobody's on it. Where's the traffic?
The most interesting thing that I hear you say is that the private firms that would have partnered with the government on this won't take the bait because it wouldn't be an investment to them, it would be a liability to them.
Well, they do cost benefit. Nobody wants to invest in something that's not a winner. They're going to do everything they can to determine are they going to make money or lose money. If they're going to lose money, they're not going to invest.
And return on investment, obviously. That's the big thing now that everybody's really looking for with the economy being the way it is. And it's just so interesting to me that we have the government pushing for something that not even a private business is willing to put the money into. And I think the reason is because the government is using taxpayer money, somebody else's money to roll the dice with.
You're right.
And you know, with private money, there's more accountability there.
You're very quick, Ms. Wilkes. You picked it up. You're putting the
Thank
pieces together, and they are pieces to put together. In fact, it's really funny. We've had lots of other interstates in South Carolina right now, and you say, well, you know, the Myrtle Beach Chamber has said so many times, well, this interstate, we got to have it. We got this economic study that says it's going to bring prosperity. I say, you know, they liken it to the best thing since peach ice cream or something. And but how do you know that? We've already got interstates that there have miles and miles and miles of nothing alongside those interstates. Just this past legislative session, our legislature passed a law establishing the I-95 Corridor Authority. I-95, a built interstate. It's been there, the newest portion, I think, 35 years, and the oldest, some maybe 42 years. So, okay, 35 years is a long time, and there is some development along there. You can look over in Florence and certain areas, but they are so concerned, the legislatures that pushed this, they're talking about certain counties along there that they say are part of a corridor of shame and all of this, and that they need development, they need jobs. They're saying all the same things that everybody's saying I-73 is going to bring, but here I-95 sits 35 years later, and they're still trying to figure out how to make it pay. In other words, just having an interstate is not an automatic ticket to prosperity.
So why then are so many officials in the DOT and in the Myrtle Beach Chamber and beyond and in the legislature pushing for 73? is there something I'm missing here?
Well, one of the reasons that the Federal Highway Administration supports it, they've done all the work, they've done the environmental impact studies and all of that, and they say that it would be a hurricane evacuation route. Well, of course, if I'm opposed to it, that makes me somebody that wants people to drown in hurricanes. Well, I really don't. Obviously, I don't. I lived, as I said, in South Florida 30 years. We had lots of hurricanes. The first thing that happens whenever the National Weather Service says we got a hurricane approaching is everybody says, let's party.
Hurricane party.
Even grandma's party, you know. And they would go and buy the beer and buy the food and buy the, you know, the plywood, and I mean, it was party time. And unless they waited till the last second and that thing was strengthening and all of a sudden it's a Category 4 and they get panicky, and guess what? You're gridlocked. If y'all recall, when we had Hurricane Katrina, if you looked at the nightmares on the interstate now, coming out of New Orleans, I mean, they were gridlocked. They were just sitting there, and that was an interstate. Same thing coming out of Galveston. I think it was Hurricane Rita a few years ago, wasn't it? And I know people saw the pictures because the media was all over it, and the cars were just sitting there. Having the interstate is not going to guarantee you that you're going to get everybody out fast enough. When the Weather Service says we've got a hurricane approaching, the state, the governor, and the emergency planning people have a plan. They know how many roads that you have. They know how many people are there, you know, if it's during the tourist season or whatever. And they give enough time to get them out if they will go. But if they don't go, there's no way you're going to get them out, interstate or not. In fact, Brad Dean, who's the executive director of the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce, went to Washington to a Senate hearing a few years ago and said, we want you to cut the hurricane warning down from 5 days to 3 days because we don't want to lose money. And I was, really? Well, if you're worried about saving lives, why are you saying to cut this down to 3 days?
Because he wants to build an interstate to account for all the extra traffic.
I don't know, but I thought that was rather heartless. I just, you know. So,
but we've spoken a good bit about Mr. Dean on this show. He makes almost $350,000
wow.
of 83%, I think, of which is taxpayer money. So, so he's doing fine with that public-private partnership, so to speak. But you know, it seems to me, you know, you've said that I-73 is not a guarantee for a ticket to prosperity. It's not a guarantee as a hurricane safeguard. So it seems to me that officials are pushing it because they're selling it to voters. We've got an election year coming up. They're selling it to voters as a one-size-fits-all, kind of one-stop shop way to fix everything, all the problems that the government has created with all this overreach and too much spending, and now they just want to put a Band-Aid on it and spend more.
Well, I'll just say this. Just keep in mind, the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce does have tax money available to it. They also do a lot of political donations, okay? I know of a legislature up in the area where I live, which is near Charlotte, and who told me that they had gotten a $300 campaign contribution from the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce. Now, this is way outside the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce's area, and said that they didn't understand why until I brought up the I-73 issue. And so I'm almost saying, well, how many campaign contributions has the Myrtle Beach Chamber made to our congressional House representatives over the years? You know, we had Congressman Spratt, we had Congressman Brown, now we have Congressman Scott, we have Senator Graham, we have Senator DeMint, you know, we have Congressman Clyburn. I would just really love to see the campaign contributions to all of those folks, because they can't get those contributions unless they agree to support I-73.
Well, you are touching on something that I've long wondered, whether it's whether there may be a pay-to-play scheme going on here. Would you go so far as to say that?
No, I can't in my position. I don't want to say that. I'm not trying to make accusations. I'm trying to ask the questions. So I speak rhetorically a lot of times. I'm saying, folks, ask the questions. Ask your chamber. Let's put out there every penny that you have spent. It's taxpayers' money. Let's be accountable.
I will tell you this. The voters are asking, the viewers are asking, and somebody else asking is the IRS and the FBI.
And
They're definitely asking the questions about those chamber political contributions.
and if you want to, and I'm more than happy to let them establish pay-to-play or corruption or anything else. I'm not the one to do that because I am not in any kind of a law enforcement. But I can tell you this, I have been an auditor in the past. My whole career has been in financial and business management areas, and I think there are too many unusual coincidences, shall we say, and I think that combined with the easy availability of public funds, you have to have a high degree of accountability. You must. You cannot assume. Well, let me put it like this. If this was a perfect world, we would never need auditors, the IRS, or anybody else. It's not a perfect world, and people do take advantage of these things.
Well, we're just lucky enough to have you. Now, you have so much information here you want to share. What do you want to share?
Oh, well, another thing that I think was in the comments with the Myrtle Beach Chamber's delegation luncheon the other day, that where Representative Veers made his comments, was that Horry County seemed to always be, I don't remember exact words they used, maybe you can recall.
I think not getting Horry County, Representative Veers has said that Horry County doesn't get its fair share in terms of the tax revenue it puts into the state coffers and versus what it gets out.
Right, and maybe I think there were comments that I read that Horry County's kind of like a, they didn't say stepchild, but I'll say what, the redheaded stepchild, or, you know, that people just thought Horry County was less than or something like that. But you know, it's funny. We have a let's kind of connect the dots here because it gets so confusing.
So what we're talking about is officials who are just so gung-ho in support of 73 being upset with you for speaking out against it as being a taxpayer burden. I think some of these officials use this argument that, you know, elect me because I'm going to get Horry County its fair share, and I'm going to get Florence its fair share, and that's because it's not getting its fair share now, and, you know, you're saying maybe we're already getting our fair share.
Well, I just looked up, this is a piece of paper I have here in front of me. I don't know if y'all can see it, doesn't matter, but it's called the South Carolina Transportation Infrastructure Bank. This is an entity. It's actually not a bank like you go to your local bank on the corner. It doesn't have ATMs, you know. But it is the bank that provides for infrastructure financing. And I just did a spreadsheet, and it has the SIB, we call it, the SIB, that's the short term, has approved over $4.5 billion, as in billion dollars worth of projects since it was established back in, I think it was 97. And they use a taxpayer stream of funding to sell bonds to provide for infrastructure. Well, Horry County, out of the total for the state now, and I'm not talking about the total of the projects, just the total that the infrastructure bank contributed, has received a little over 26%, and not added into this document is another $10 million that they just slipped over about a year ago that nobody knew about. And thanks to the leadership in Horry County. So that's 26%. Charleston County.
So it's basically, and I want to make sure we get everything in, so we're running out of time.
Okay.
That's basically a bogus explanation, justification for I-73. So many officials say, we need I-73 because Horry County doesn't get its fair share.
Right, and that's right.
But the figures, the numbers themselves speak to the contrary.
Well, at least on major projects, anything over 100 million. Charleston was at 33% as compared to Horry 26%, but over half of theirs was the Cooper River Bridge. If you take that out, it's probably 16 or 17%. Greenville was only, because people are always comparing, Horry, Charleston, Greenville, we don't get ours, you know. Greenville was only 12.5%. So folks, Horry County has by far, and this is not including the money that was contributed by the local taxes. That is not including that. So I'm just saying that Horry County, I don't understand why they say they don't get their fair share. And they've got another $1 billion worth of work planned on the widening of 378 and I think 501.
Maybe instead of Commissioner Sarah Knuckles getting fired, it should be Representative Veers getting fired for making such a reckless call. We thank you so much, Ms. Knuckles, for coming on and for being a whistleblower, a watchdog for the taxpayers. It's so important to have somebody you know, really in the thick of things, willing to come out and speak about some very underhanded things going on in the government, and to watch out for taxpayer dollars, bottom line. When I come back, I will be with speaking about the Government Gone Wild segment of the week, and it's a good one. See you in just a minute. Welcome back to On the Spot. Right now, we're doing our Government Gone Wild segment of the week. This week, we're talking about something pretty sad. Congress is cutting funding for those to heat their homes with. Almost 9 million people, a lot of them in the Northeast, rely on this money to, it comes from the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program to heat their homes. It's a lot of elderly people, a lot of families being affected by this congressional cut. Meanwhile, Congress is spending trillions in federal aid to foreign countries and spending trillions to start wars we can't finish. And meanwhile, here at home, elderly and children are actually literally freezing to death. That is a travesty. It's silly. It's ridiculous. It's unbelievable. What about family values that Republicans always talk about? It's the congressional Republicans that are responsible for this really, really ill-advised and reckless budget cuts. The wintertime is upon us. It's cold. Families, old people, children are going to be suffering. Congressional Republicans, that's not family values. Cut the foreign spending, cut the foreign aid, and cut all the spending on the wars, and let's make sure that old people and children here at home are not freezing to death in the wintertime. That is government gone wild to the extreme. I will be back with Hot and Bothered. Welcome back. I'm hot and I'm bothered. This week I'm hot for the city of Florence because Florence government officials are apparently pro-business, which is more than I can say for Horry County and Myrtle Beach officials. Now, Florence is welcoming a bike week to welcome all the biker business that Horry County and Myrtle Beach kicked out. Organizer Sonny Copeland, who's organizing the Florence Bike Week, has said that the event will include, quote, a lot of stuff we can't do at the beach. You can't do anything at the beach anymore. Florence has been overwhelmingly welcoming. So to all of you watching in Florence, congratulations. Your business will be booming come this spring. And to all of you watching in Horry County and Myrtle Beach, condolences. Your business will be dragging this spring. And remember that come election time. All right, now for what's got me bothered, Lowe's home improvement stores for pulling an ad on a show called All American Muslim. It's a reality show. The point of the show is to show that American Muslims are just like regular Americans. A Christian group thinks that the show promotes terrorism and called on Lowe's to pull the ads, which Lowe's did. Bad move, Lowe's. I am bothered by you. All right, we're running out of time. That is the end of today's show. Before we go, I want to just say, speaking of religious prejudice, I'll remind you about my two-part special next week on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. It's called Faith in Politics, and I'll be sitting down with area religious leaders to discuss what role, if any, faith should play in politics. See you then.